Contingency contract. As a semi-retired tryhard YouTuber, it's once again time to figure out what to do while this grossly overdone event passes me by. Well, I might take a crack at the Mudrock map, that one looks kinda fun. Anyhow, CC22 is the last one for a while. It had an unusually low play rate on CN, probably spurred by everyone's love for the SN event mechanic, so they still haven't made a CC3 too. I used to like CC, but the last one I enjoyed was CC5. There is only so many ways you can recycle the same system until it becomes overdone. I don't have any problem with hard events, quite the opposite, but I want some new mechanics and systems implemented in them. Poo was supposed to be that, but instead it was just CC with a new and frankly inferior UI. What the fuck does 745 points even mean? How much is risk 18 anyway? But enough about my gripes with CC, I can yap about CC like a homeless Italian for long enough to make that its own video. Now what I want to talk about today is the other modes AG made to replace or at least supplement CC. AG aren't afraid to try new stuff, so we had RA, SSS, TFN and of course Microsoft DoS. While the other events got a sequel or at least a rework, DoS was left to dry, presumably due to a cease and desist they got from Microsoft. Maybe being very negatively received had something to do with it, but I'm not sure. SSS wasn't scrapped and that one is a trash fire at best. Now this is the part of the script where I'm supposed to convince you that MS-DOS wasn't that bad, but it was 100% a mess. I get all the hate it got. Thing is, game design is a skanky hole, and the line between great and awful is a lot smaller than it looks. I think DOS had the potential to replace CC, but it was never properly explored. So here's what the rest of the video will be. I will outline the great ideas in DOS that are worth repeating and go over the issues that led to its poor performance. I will then suggest a few changes that in my opinion would have made DOS a far better event, and you can decide for yourself whether it's something you want to play or not. First, the good stuff. The idea of having multiple main maps with progressive difficulty is awesome. Instead of just one map for 2 weeks, having 3, technically 4 maps that get more complicated gives you a lot more variety over the event. It's also a good environment to introduce a very complicated boss by slowly adding more mechanics with every stage, just like DOS did. This is by far the best idea from the event and it should have been preserved. Instead of CC dailies, we had the trauma stages. We tried to introduce a survival kind of gameplay in Arknights. They weren't awful per se, but kinda just thrown in there and could have been used better. And finally, the buff system relative to the maps. CC gives you a very easy map that gets progressively more difficult with the risks you take in exchange for greater rewards. DOS is quite simply the opposite of that. It gives you a difficult map and then gives you optional buffs to tackle that map. Now this is fine in concept, but the execution is fumbled horribly. So we preserve multiple main maps and a complicated unique boss, side piece stages with some goofy mechanic and the buff system. Here is what needed to be different. First of all, the reward system for this event made zero sense. The most common complaint you would hear about the event is that it was too hard. This was true in the sense that it was too hard to get all the rewards from it. In CC, the max potential risk is something like 35-ish. Don't look at me, I'm not using the new point system, it's stupid. But to get the full rewards, you only need to beat something like risk 18. Why the fuck does DOS expect players to beat something close to max risk just to get the full event rewards? Granted, the rewards were trash anyway, but that just gives you one more reason not to bother. So the first change would be to make it easier to get the full rewards. Going by CC difficulty, if that's all they want to do, a year-old account should be able to get the full rewards with relative ease, as long as they put in the time. Now there are a few naysayers who corner you in a dark alley and tell you about how much they enjoy DOS. Make DOS easy, you say? Blasphemy, that will ruin what makes the event unique, away with you. Or something to that effect. Don't get cornered in dark alleys by people who enjoy DOS. Fear not, you strange DOS-loving person. I don't want to make the maps easier. No, in fact I want to make them harder. The problem wasn't that the maps were too hard. If compared to high-risk CC, they were a level below the easiest maps available from that. The problem was that DOS expected you to play high-risk CC just to get the rewards. You can make wildly difficult maps and then still encourage people to play them for the rewards if you simply made the buffs more helpful in crushing the difficulty down. Just like how a CC map on max risk becomes 100 times more difficult, DOS could have been an extremely hard map on which you could use special tools to completely obliterate it. Which brings us to the second point that needs some work, the buff system in its entirety. To explain how bad the buff system is in DoS, you need to understand that its buffs weren't even bad, actually they were rather powerful, particularly the lava damage buff, which made it do stupid amounts of damage and a dozen gravel deploys would kill the boss on its own. But almost nobody used the buffs because they were presented so poorly, the buffs themselves looked kinda one-dimensional, and it got in the way of getting the rewards from the event. What we need here is some style. Instead of hiding all the buffs in one small menu that only shows up after you die, and you completely miss it if you skip the tutorial, it can be presented as the central gimmick of the event. Make it its own page with its own art, ideally music. A great example of this already in the game is the IC event with Gavio's murder cars and the shopping integrated strategies. Then you are given some budget to pick from a wide list of buffs, let's say 30ish or so, like a mix between the IS shop with the randomness and a CC page. You get rewarded more event points for completing a map while not using a certain portion of your budget. But there is no reward for playing without items at all. You want people to actually use the event mechanic after all. The buffs themselves should be as varied as CC buffs. If we are super lazy, we can just copy items from IS, or at least their aesthetic. Bonus damage after using skill, extra physical damage, extra deployment, DP, life points, etc. And then there's space for those CC challenge quests, but in reverse. Beat the map or using these 3 buffs can be used just to guide people to a few obvious combos that do decent damage. We can also have other stuff mixed in, like debuff that one asshole enemy to the next dimension for 3 points or something, just to really lean into the whole reverse CC thing. Balance really isn't important here. Much like we have operators that completely break the game and it chugs along just fine, it's also fine to have event mechanics that completely break the event itself, as long as they make you think for 2 seconds. It's fine if the buffs we get make the event even easier than normal, just as long as the player has to take a moment to consider how to actually abuse those buffs. So this achieves 3 things. It's easier to get all the rewards, cause you can abuse some busted ass shit to get them. Even if you are just playing for the rewards, you are still pushed to engage with the system, since there is no reward locked behind not using or barely using the buffs. You get to think about what buff combo would work best for your squad. Now, here people would say that everyone would just copy it off YouTube, but believe it or not, most people actually try stuff for themselves before copying something off of YouTube. That first experience is important, even if it's just try something, fall on your face and then look up a guide on YouTube. Another issue is the fewer event energy DoS has. It has barely any art, no new music, effectively only 1 new enemy. I know, there's technically 6 new things you can deploy Texas at, but all 6 of them are just different parts of the boss. It even used the music from the Solace Holiday, like what the fuck, the boss stage is a volcano, at least use Pompeii's theme, holy shit. Presentation matters. If an event is hyped as a big thing, people will give it more attention than if it's shoved under the door like a 3-day-old newspaper someone forgot to deliver. And finally, we're back to the trauma stages. They were mostly fine, but all used the same gimmick of stalling enemies, so it got old after 5 stages. Lower them to 3 stages, make the stupid broken main map buffs be available for use in the trauma stages, and then make them goofier. Of course, again, make sure that you don't need full tryhard clears just to get the basic rewards, but beyond that, AG shouldn't be afraid of making really stupid bullshit stages that you then need to counter with your own stupid bullshit buffs. There's no need to strictly stick to the timer system, and other challenges can be made, like abusing sleep or push, etc. With this system, most players can get their rewards and get to screw around with buffs, so it's not just the usual Arknights gameplay, while tryhards who like the usual Arknights gameplay can minimize or even skip the buffs entirely, to get as difficult an experience as the usual CC stuff. So in short, imagine DoS if rewards were less of a pain to get, actually had music and new art, maps were harder but you actually had interesting buffs and you were encouraged to use them by the reward system. Is that something you would like to play? If so, it's a shame they never tried to rework DoS. This has been Utunada Fewer Video 1 from Silvergun. Less than a month to go until Utunada comes to Yen and Arknights becomes perfect.